So basically, the climax of this episode is like a boss fight with the Flash, with the starship zipping around from place to place. Man, I love Star Trek Discovery. It does the wildest shit. Hello interwebs, and welcome to my ongoing retro review series of Star Trek Discovery Season 1 being done in preparation for Star Trek Discovery's 5th and final season coming later this April. Today we're going to be reviewing what was the original Season 1 mid-season finale, Into the Forest I Go. However, before we get started, I do want to take a moment to briefly acknowledge the recent passing of Kenneth Mitchell, who not only played Cole in this episode and season of Star Trek Discovery, but also 2 other Klingons in Season 2, Aurelio in Season 3, and also appeared on Star Trek Lower Decks, not even to mention his work in Jericho and numerous other TV series. I sadly was only lucky enough to meet Kenneth Mitchell briefly at the Star Trek Mission Chicago convention a couple of years ago, but even in those few minutes, it was very, very clear that he had an incredibly kind heart. And that is reinforced by the fact that I've had the absolute joy to meet other folks who worked on Star Trek and other things that actually knew him much more closely, and every single time that they have mentioned him, they have just had a big smile on their face, reflective of the person that I'm sure he was. And it's very certain that Star Trek as a franchise, as a work of art, and more importantly, a community of fans and creatives was very lucky to have had him as a part of us, and his loss will not only be deeply felt, but his presence and his work and his humanity will certainly be remembered. And I want to send my love to all of his friends and family who are going through this at this time. And just thank you to Kenneth for all of your work and what you gave to so many Trekkies. And I hope you're living it up in Sto-Vo-Kor right now. On that somber note, let's awkwardly shift into the review of this episode. This episode picks up right up from the last one, with the peaceful Pavans under threat from the Klingons due to their naivety in trying to broker peace between the Klingons and the Federation. Part of the value of doing a retro review series like this is being able to look at the episode within the larger context of the season, now that we know how the whole season goes. And I think that this episode in particular is one that really changes depending on how I look at it, as an episode on its own, as well as something as part of the larger season. Because doing so gives me a lot of conflicting things to talk about, and I think that is mainly centered upon the character of Lorca. Lorca's big speech at the beginning of this episode, where he stands up to Starfleet and says he's going to go off book to protect an innocent species, on initial watch plays like him fighting for the values of Starfleet over Starfleet's own growing pragmatic militarism, which fits perfectly in with the themes of the season overall so far.
You want me to run from a fight and leave a peaceful species to face annihilation?
I'm sorry, but the logic is clear.
This reading then characterizes Lorca as someone who may be a surface-level jerk stemming from the hardening of his heart after all the trauma that he's faced in the Klingon War, but actually is deep down a good-hearted person, which feels like a great culmination of not only his arc, but the themes of this season to this point. Mirroring Burnham's story that while trauma can be damaging, the way to heal from it is to fight for connections with others, even if you're living in a world that's trying to tell you to view everyone as an enemy. But on rewatch, when you have the knowledge that Lorca is actually a fascist from the mirror universe, we know now that Lorca is actually taking advantage of the situation here in order to get more spore drive jumps so that he can return home to his own mirror universe. And you can see seeds of this throughout the episode of his excellent manipulation of Stamets, whom Lorca pushes to put Stamets' health on the line by arguing that it's for the greater good.
I wish I didn't have to ask you to make this sacrifice, but the Klingons won't stop until they've destroyed everything in their path. Everyone. And we can't stop them.
But also by playing into Stamets' values of exploration and scientific discovery, with Lorca arguing that if they do these jumps, they would be able to explore alternate universes.
You showed me this invention could take us to places we never dreamed we could reach. Places far beyond our preconceptions of time and space.
Captain, I didn't know you cared.
We have to win this war. But then
the journey continues.
It's a great depiction of how fascists can use pure idealism for their own ends. I just really love that the show on first glance makes it seem that despite his trauma, Lorca is actually a true Star Trek captain deep down, when in reality when you watch it again, it just shows him being a fucked up manipulator trying to exploit Stamets' ideals and his health for his own personal gain. And the final moment where Lorca takes his eyedroppers to watch the Klingon ship explode so he can revel in his perverse fascistic satisfaction at death and violence is a great foreshadowing of his true motives. All that praise being said, what frustrates me in all of this is that this dual interpretation seems to have zero effect on Lorca as a character down the line this season, where he is ultimately revealed to just be a mustache-twirling cartoonish fascist. And I'll save this for that later episode reveal, but it really frustrates me that they have Lorca perform being this good guy, and that doesn't actually affect his viewpoint. As they say, who we pretend to be starts to become who we actually are, and I really wish that the Federation values that Lorca continually extols for his own ends had some level of effect on him down the line. This isn't me saying that Lorca shouldn't have been an antagonist or it should have turned out to be a good guy in the end, but for me to say that I wish they had displayed more nuance when he does actually turn out to be the villain later on. I really wish that his encounter with the Federation and his having to espouse their ideals to get what he wants, like protecting others and valuing exploration, had, like root beer, start off bubbling and clawing to his taste, but slowly over time had forced him to come to like it because
it's insidious.
It would have made Lorca's later turn so much more nuanced and intriguing, but alas, we'll get there when we get there. Speaking on the negative though, there are also hints here of Lorca's creepy romantic feelings for Burnham as he tries to overprotect her in this episode, to which Burnham has to push back to get to go onto the away mission.
Sir, you offered me a place on this ship.
And now I'm ordering you to stay. That understood?
You are the captain, but you are not using the full resources to ensure the success of your mission.
It's never explicitly stated, but it's definitely the intention of those beats to hint at it, and I hate it, especially because the show never really does anything to address it later on, other than to imply that he does have some creepy fetishist view of Burnham. I really wish if the show was going to have that be present, it had done something with his creepy objectifying protectionism, especially considering that it could have been used to contrast Culber's more earnest caring for his partner Stamets' health portrayed in this episode.
Well, I'm not ready to play roulette with his brain.
Duly noted, Doctor. Send the report directly to me.
Captain.
To me, Doctor, and I shall read it.
That being said, I do love that the gay couple in this episode gets to be the one to show true, unpossessive, and respectful love here, with Culber worrying about but ultimately respecting Stamets' decision to go use the spore drive despite it possibly hurting his health. Stamets' "I love you" right before the jump starts is incredibly meaningful.
I love you.
And Lorca forcing Culber to keep Stamets in the machine while he watches his loved one possibly die for not only the battle, but Lorca's own twisted ends is heartbreaking. And their kiss at the end of this episode, something really revolutionary, not only for the time, but still today, and for Star Trek in general, is really, really wonderful. Burnham's arc in this episode is solid as well, as she deviates away from her away mission on the Klingon ship to save Admiral Cornwell, wishing to bring everyone home rather than focusing solely on the militaristic mission. Again, her Starfleet idealism coming into play. I also love the contextualizing of the universal translator to have the Klingon actors speak English, which then allows Burnham to make the argument for Federation's values of communication and understanding.
All I see is another attempt by humanity to rob us of our identity.
It's proof of our desire to communicate.
But still having those ideals fail in the face of Cole's stubborn authoritarian drive for power, which is an excellent way to speak to how high-minded ideals that Burnham has are not always enough in the face of those who only wish to seek power, who instead require resistance to push back against, not pacifism or appeasement as the Federation, and even Star Trek itself at times, has sometimes argued for. I'm looking at you, Federation appeasement of the Cardassian expansionism in Star Trek The Next Generation. This brings me to stuff that I hate, because we have Tyler in this episode having a PTSD flashback after seeing his torturer, L'Rell, with Admiral Cornwell helping Tyler address his trauma in a time of crisis, contrasting how she was unable to get Lorca to do so a few episodes earlier, showing how acknowledging trauma is necessary even in fact especially in, times of war. This storyline is fine in theory, but is ruined by the future knowledge that Tyler's actual trauma stems from his confusion about his own implanted memories and Voke's real ones merging, which then conflates what would have been presumably a consensual sexual relationship with L'Rell as Voke into sexual assault as viewed by Tyler. It's a storyline that gets lip service later this season and next, but never really gets fully explored, and just comes off as sensational and exploitative here. There is a good moment that I do appreciate near this episode's end, where Tyler opens up to Burnham about his trauma in a way that few TV shows ever let men do, given that sexual violence towards men is often not depicted, and when it is, it's often not taken seriously or even played for comedy, as it was in Star Trek Enterprise's 2001 episode Unexpected.
Perhaps the next step would have been to meet her holographic parents. If I'm not mistaken, on some planets, that's a precursor to marriage.
We took a ride in a rowboat.
But the hints at, but never fully reckoning with sexual violence towards a man, as well as the fact that it is diluted by weird sleeper agent drama later on this season, makes this decent setup for that arc ultimately deeply disappointing on a rewatch, especially for a Star Trek series. All that being said, that is with the asterisk of in my memory, so maybe my continuing retro reviews of the season will change my opinion on that, but I don't hold out much hope. Moving on though, the final moment with Lorca manipulating Stamets into spore jumping home, which he then uses after he learns that Stamets intends to stop spore jumping after that to take Discovery to the Mirror Universe, is a great mid-season cliffhanger.
Let's go home.
It works both on the initial watch, given that you don't know why and where they jumped to, and on the rewatch, when you know that Lorca was the one that did it. That said, this is the start of what many consider to be the worst part of Season 1, the show's detour to the Mirror Universe for several episodes, with many arguing that this storyline distracts from the season's so far nuanced, ongoing Klingon arc to instead focus on a more cartoonish version of fascism full of twist-centered storylines rather than earnest completion of character arcs. This is the moment to many people's mind where the show became less about actually building a cohesive narrative and more about paying off mystery boxes. Something that would continue to be a problem with not only Star Trek Discovery, but also Star Trek Picard in future seasons. We'll see if that actually ends up being the case as these retro reviews continue, but this episode on its own terms, despite a few issues here and there that I have with it, works rather well, and feels like a good culmination of numerous arcs so far this season. However, this praise is complicated by my future knowledge of how some of these stories play out, both positively and negatively, and even more so considering that this episode really feels like it's supposed to be the climax of this season's Klingon War arc. Honestly, having rewatched this now, I actually do wonder if my initial speculation way back at the start of this retro rewatch series of the 2 added episodes this season having been the expansion of the pilot episode is not correct, because this episode really feels like it was meant to be the end of the Klingon arc this season, as it really does wrap up neatly the Cole and Sarcophagus ship storylines that have been our main driving Klingon stories this season, with the show now shifting to the start of the Mirror Universe arc. I wonder if the initial idea for Season 2 would have been to continue to return to the Klingon arc, but having been instead quickly concluded by the season's added final 2 episodes. Or maybe it's a mix of the two, because it really does feel like this episode would have actually worked great with flashbacks to the pilot episode scenes between Burnham and Georgiou, as I initially speculated was the original intentional structure of this season. In the end, all I can say is who knows, but that is my thoughts for this episode of Star Trek Discovery Into the Forest I Go. But what are your opinions? I'd love to hear them all down below in the comments. And beyond all of that, my friends, I hope you all live long and prosper.